I get the sense that no matter how hard you push down on men and masculinity, no matter how hard you, using all of your words, deconstruct and blah, 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 take it all, tear it all down, destroy all the reasons for it existing and all the context. If you push it all down, there will still be an urge inside men to behave in this manner. And the thing that changes is their ability to stifle those urges and their ability to live with dissonance. I think that we're seeing people live with dissonance nationally, individually, in top to bottom, in the sense that we're trying to squish down these natural behaviors, these natural instincts to protect, to provide, to create, all these things. We're squishing them down. And so what's modulating is somebody's ability to withstand that squish rather than actually changing the very nature of what men and masculinity are. Am I getting that right philosophically? Is this is my sense. Is there a philosophical answer to explain this sense in that I'm right or wrong, or this is me asking questions? I don't know.
So
I want to say one thing about that quickly.
Jump in there, Millerman. Go for it.
So one is, there's this old saying, Strauss defers to it sometimes, and it's useful, which is that you can chase nature out the door with a pitchfork, and nevertheless it comes back. So in other words, every attempt to eradicate the nature of man or of the human being is going to be failed. It's going to be a frustrated effort. The only problem is that when it comes back with a vengeance. So if you don't know what you're doing, you also don't know what you're setting yourself up for. So that's one view, that nature will return. But at the same time, what Spencer was saying about conquering matter, conquering nature, conquering limits, it's this idea that we're not defined by our nature. And that if there are still obstacles, if there are still urges, if there is still some resistance, it's just a matter of overcoming that. We're free with respect to our nature. And if we're not yet, we will be. You see, so that in some sense is the line. That's the battle. Either you think nature will return, or you think we are free with respect to nature, and our job is technologically to rewrite what it is to be human.
Michael,
that's a war that's playing out before our eyes.
Michael, what is your personal opinion on that? Don't quote anybody else. Don't cite anybody else. What's your personal opinion on this? Is that the right way to go? The wrong way to go? Is it productive? Is it a disaster?
I think that the attempt to eradicate human nature technologically, based on the view that who we are is a freedom over nature or a freedom against nature, is a philosophic mistake, and that the political consequences will be and have been disastrous.
Mr. Klavan.
I mean, I completely agree. I think that Michael invokes exactly the right question, right? Is nature going to come back in the back door? And I would add to it only one sort of rambling anecdote from the ancient world, and that is Dionysius of Halicarnassus tells us, this is a historian of, his work is called Roman Antiquities, so he's a historian of Rome, but really one of these big rambling compendia of anecdotes and tales. And he tells us that there was a tyrant, Aristodemus of Cumae, who took over Cumae. And he was afraid that the sons of the noblemen he had deposed, so he kicks out all the guys that are in charge, he has them killed or exiled, and then he's afraid that their boys, their sons, are going to rise up and avenge their fathers. Or more generally, he has the fear that all tyrants have, which is that if you oppress people for long enough, they get it into their head that they don't actually have to be oppressed and they're going to take up arms. So Aristodemus exiles all of the noble sons of the people he's deposed. And then he says, what do I do with these other guys that are around? Because there is, in the view of Dionysius, right, there is this natural energy of sort of masculine, standing up and not taking things lying down, right? That's going to well up eventually if you oppress people long enough. The Greek word for this is thumos. There's an energy, a spirit, and a kind of anger at being oppressed that will rise up. And so Aristodemus says that in order to stop this from ever happening, what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat the little boys like little girls, and that will feminize them. And so at school, they're going to be surrounded by women. They're going to sing the songs that women sing. They're going to wear the clothes that women wear. And then by the time they reach adulthood, they will be so sort of essentially neutered, right? So gelded, so feminized that they'll never rise up against me ever again. This is a pretty good analog for what our ruling classes are in the business of doing right now. I mean, this is, and I think that what Michael is saying, quite rightly, is they think they can. They think that where Aristoteles failed, they can succeed. And they are currently engaged in a world historical project of testing that theory. If we beat men down, if we tell them to hate their natural impulses, if we sand those impulses away, if we demonize thumos, if we demonize courage, and if we put all these restrictions in place and give all these sort of soft, mollifying explanations for why you can't leave your house because it's too dangerous, you might kill grandma, right? Like, can we break nature using the tools that we now have? We'll find out. I think we're going to see what the answer to that question is, you know. I personally think that it will end in tears. And it's one reason why whatever is going to happen, you know, in the next 10, 50 years, it's incumbent upon us to preserve ancient wisdom so that when it all falls crashing down, we're able to rebuild something that looks more like nature and reality in the digital age. But I do think that they're making a serious bid, and they believe that they're going to do it. Like, I think that their belief that circumstances have changed to such an extent that they can simply exile nature entirely using their sheer political power and technological wherewithal, that belief is very, very sincere. And you can tell because of how angry they get when you tell them it's going to go wrong, which is the kind of anger that kings get when prophets tell them that God will avenge wrongdoing. And so, you know, you kind of stand here and say, well, this is obviously a terrible idea, but it's hard to persuade people of that when the world looks to them as if they can remake it in their own image.
That is a fantastic anecdote. I'm going to look that one up. Aristoteles. I like that. And you can see evidence of that all over the place. And it's going to be interesting to see how long people can withstand the stymieing. I guess there's probably a better word for that. And if the reaction to that will come back even more than it had been, maybe even the darker sides of masculinity would return as a bid to just reclaim masculinity in general. And in fact, now that I say that out loud, that's actually probably a pretty legitimate concern. Michael, where are you right now? What's going on in your head with all this?
So a few things. Spencer talked about the technological wherewithal of this project, and that's a big issue here because we're not just giving, let's say, boys the dolls and pink wallpaper, or whatever the case is. It's not just a culturation. It's not just changing the environment. It is now a reaching into the soul and the fabric of the human being and reprogramming it, like some sort of new Prometheanism that treats the human being as putty in our hands. So I think that technological aspect, the ability to, so you say, for example, we're going to dress the boys as girls, etc. You go to the other extreme, we're going to make them eunuchs and we're going to reprogram their DNA. So that's where the technological wherewithal is going. It's going to a complete reprogramming through and through. And that's a big concern there. It's not only masculinity that's at risk, it's humanity that's at risk. This project doesn't end with the attack on men.
It doesn't. Well, we can get to where that's going in a second. If the project involves using technology to change the body of men in order to change their behavior and thus the political environment, is that not some acknowledgement on their part of the union of the body and the spirit and sort of the, not having them be totally separated and not influencing each other, Spencer?
Well, I think there's a sort of fuzziness about this question, to be very, very generous and polite. There's a fuzziness about this in what you might call the woke project. And my own sort of historical view of that is that that fuzziness comes from the sort of postmodern philosophical convictions that we were talking about, or even you might sort of ungenerously call it a sort of Enlightenment era optimism taken to its extreme. That, as Michael said, like what we are is just freedom, and that freedom is 360 degrees around, and matter is there for us to impose the will that we freely choose onto it, right? Our bodies, the world, all of that. That philosophical commitment butts up with what we've been talking about here as kind of natural intuitions, which now have been bolstered by hundreds of years of Western tradition of talking about things as if there were a soul and a body, and as if the body and the soul were in this kind of intimate dynamism and this relationship with each other. So the fuzziness that we're talking about, right, is that on the one hand, I'm a man in a woman's body. Or I put more simply, I'm a man, right? I'm a trans man. And that claim is taken by those who believe it to be 100% true, and true in exactly the same way that when I say I'm a man, those two things are true in the same way, that a trans man and what you would call a cisgender man, like those of us here who say, when we say I'm a man, that's the same thing as when a trans man says. And that is a staggeringly sort of radical claim that says, like, the matter stuff, the nature, the basics doesn't matter. It's just putty in our hands, like Michael said. And yet at the same time, right, there is a sense of what's called gender dysphoria, or a sense of, being uncomfortable with your bodily self, that implies that physical reality is actually very much a part of our essential selves. So why would you even need to take testosterone unless there is such a thing as a man, as a natural man, and that thing has certain physical realities and physical limitations, physical shape, that a woman doesn't have. And so there is an incoherence and a tension there. And I think that incoherence is in and of itself good evidence of what Michael was claiming, which is that this is a philosophically and politically disastrous project, that what you're really doing is kind of in your mind imagining away the material world, but in your actions demonstrating that the material world is still very much there. And that is kind of a recipe for madness. It's a recipe for making people feel perpetually uncomfortable with themselves. And the fact that we now have this technology, and Michael's very, very right, that technology is not just about doing away with masculinity, but is sort of promises us that it will do away with humanity full stop, that it will totally burst open the boundaries of ourselves, right? This is the idea that this could be possible is a longstanding idea, and it is encapsulated in the myth or the story of Faust, right? Dr. Faustus is the one who basically sells his soul to the devil, his soul being his essential humanness in some way, for the complete power over the material world that knowledge is supposed to give you. And again, it does seem as if the evidence of the way that people in, for example, the radical trans movement, and I should say, by the way, that there are many actual transgender people who don't at all believe the things that I just said, who believe something much kind of more straightforward about, well, I have a discomfort with my physical body and want to change it, or something along those lines, right? But the really like full bore stuff that I'm a man, I say I'm a man, that's what manhood is, but also I need to totally reconfigure my body, does suggest that there's like a kind of dysfunction or a mania going on here that has to do with the actual impossibility of transcending matter in the way that we want to.
I wrote about this in my book, Democrats, Deplorable, published in 2018, very extensively about why I thought that this trans issue was sort of the hill. I'm all in on this one because of the absurdity of saying that you're the wrong social construct. And the only way to change it is by injecting testosterone into your body. Like, I'm a social construct that must be changed by physical essence of masculinity injected into my body. And then it changes their behavior. Anybody who's experimented with testosterone, been on testosterone replacement therapy, can attest to the fact lower testosterone leads to all kinds of some behaviors. Higher testosterone can lead to other behaviors, so increased competitive, risk-takingness, sexual drive, aggression. And the absence is the opposite: confidence, energy, not to mention mass, strength, size, all of the things that we associate with testosterone and steroids and such. If you've done that, you understand completely that the trans argument about it being the wrong social construct only to be solved by an injection of testosterone is preposterous. And it represents the queering project, right? The obliteration of all barriers so that we all become everything and then nothing. This is the last point at which, if you go along with this, I believe that you're like going along with insanity, and to be sane, you have to draw a line in the sand on this matter.